So I think we're going to invite some other people up on stage as well. Could we please have Mr. Solims and Mr. Jørgensen up on stage? Hi, welcome.
Hi.
I think you're going to get to introduce yourselves. I
Yep.
think we have a small video. I don't know which one is first of you, but is it you, Mr. Solims? Is it the video first? Or is it the PowerPoint first? Do we know? From the technicians? Hello.
While we're waiting for the video, maybe we can just introduce ourselves.
Exactly. I think it's you first.
So, my name is Didzis. I am taking care about the products for one of the mobile operators here in Latvia. Super cool job to do. Lots of technology, and you might have it's like why tourism and you know, it's like mobile operator. I mean, I actually want to say, guys, that the tourism industry is like big thank you to you, because you are the ones who are actually moving the technology front, and you are the ones who are, well, making us a little bit more money. And I will later touch upon it exactly how and why. But I'm actually very kind of excited about being able to tell you a few theses about these things, why and how you're making us a little bit more money.
Tele2 is Latvia's fastest telco provider, and it has the independent data to prove it. However, an outdated public perception is that our competitor is better. So we thought, how can we prove that we have the fastest data, 5G ready nationwide coverage, and a brilliant range of innovative home tech to complement those things? The answer? With a customized Tele2 smart home on wheels. We introduced a new smart home with a TVC.
Is Latvia ready for the era of 5G, where devices interact with each other using internet? In order to find that out, we here at Tele2 set up smart technologies in a house, on wheels. Smart home. It speaks your language and can do many things for you.
Es ņemšu jūsu gudro māju un braukšu Latvijas ainavās. Dziļi mežā, pie ūdeņiem un beigās pie jūriņas. O, māja zvana. Kāds pie durvīm? Čau, tūlītās es tev slēdzu vaļā, ja?
Tu pats esi projām, bet īstenībā tu esi mājās ar acīm.
Un ja tehnoloģijas palīdz būt laimīgam, es neredzu iemeslu, kāpēc lai tās nelietot.
We made sure that with the powerful mobile internet from Tele2, Latvia is ready for the era of 5G technologies.
Internets nav tikai komunikācijas starp tevi un tavu telefonu, bet arī starp ierīcēm. Un 5G tieši par šo?
Find out more about the expedition. Tele2.
Then showed off its smart features in a series of user-friendly demos, as well as some quirky behind-the-scenes shots. The simplicity and ease of the smart home extended online to our banners, landing pages, and kept rolling on into all communication channels. Outdoors, print and shops. Hey, we even had a live radio show broadcast. Yet, we knew we needed to go bigger, so to let consumers have their full smart home experience, we put it on AirBnB. And of course, because we're mobile, it didn't just sit in one beautiful place. That's why the listings were an instant hit, and since July, have been fully booked all the way through to September, successfully driving home the message of great connectivity. Tele2.
Wow, thank you. Morten.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry to be a spoiler, because now we're going from today 1,000 years back in time. Do we have the slides? Maybe? Because I'm from Jelling, what we also call home of the Viking kings. Do you know where the Vikings came from? Yes, Denmark, that's right, yes. Actually, we think they were from Denmark. I'm from a little town called Jelling, and actually in Jelling we have these two famous rune stones. One of them made by Gorm the Old, the first king of Denmark, and Harold Bluetooth. And yes, that's where the name Bluetooth comes from. It's true, yeah. And we have this 1,000-year-old story. Next, please.
I think you...
Oh, am I supposed to do something?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, technology. We have this 1,000 years of history, but 5 years ago we didn't have too many visitors. Actually, only a few who came to see these stones. And then we tried to think new. We made some of the dead objects alive with a new exhibition. We made it more digital, made it playful, also for children to come there. New scenographic ways of showing the story about the Vikings. And curiosity was something we, from the start, said, we don't have all the answers. Normally when people come to a museum, they think that we have all the answers, but we made a lot of things that they have to play, and we have a lot of question marks. And actually, we went from the red point there is where we started with the new technology, and we had an increasable amount of visitors to come there. And what's the best part of it is actually that using new technology didn't make the older people not coming. As you were saying with your app, the days where we said, okay, the people that are more than 65 years old, they can't use it, that's a lie. Especially when grandparents come with their grandchildren. Makes one cry, actually, at the museum. And we see a lot of them. The children learn the elder a little bit about the technology, and the elder learn the children of the story. So that's what we think the best achievement in Jelling. So just to close, where were the Vikings from? Jelling, yes, good, thank you. I think that was it, yeah.
Please have a seat. And I'm going to see if I can take us through a little bit a talk about the age of smart tourism. But first of all, I would like to have a little bit more information about your cool smart home project. Where did it start, and why did you do it?
It started kind of well, where everything starts, and where is that? That's probably in the brain, right? So look, that project, it was very important for us. But I think for you, it's even more interesting in some kind of sense, and let me tell you why. I was actually very happy to see Morten showing us the Google Assistant conversation that was done, and like, why is that important? Well, because there's new kind of paradigm right now starting to happen quietly. You know, most of the change, it's not like, you know, the big media will tell you one day that, you know, now is the day when all the people who use smartphones. No. It happens quietly. Right now, millions of people in the States and in other, mostly Western part of the world, are getting to use those Google Assistants. And why is this voice important? And why is this important for tourism? Well, the thing is, there are two kinds of people. There's people like me, I would say, and people like my wife.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit?
People like me, they are about like, okay, let's get this done fast. Let's spend on it like 30 seconds, and I'm done with it. And then there are people like my wife. And she starts planning the next family trip, the day when we come back from the original one. And initially I was like, why would you do this? I couldn't understand her. And then in one of the events, actually, I got the answer, because some speaker said there, you know what? There's this thing, dopamine, which your brain produces, right? It's kind of happiness hormone. It's called dopamine, might be other name, but let's call it a happiness hormone. And this happiness hormone is produced when you do things which you really, really like. The shocking fact for me was that it's scientifically proven that you consume more of this happiness thing in your brain more before the actual trip than during the trip. So that explains why she is like spending 2 months planning meticulously and reading all of those reviews and planning where we will go and all, because she gets so much more happiness during that time from that whole experience than actually maybe on the day, because on the day the husband is grumpy, he doesn't want to carry the bags, and you know the day might be spoiled. But before, that's very, very important. And then how is she using that time before? Of course she's using it in digital area. Of course she's reading reviews and all of that. And what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, the web first, that's the past. The mobile first, that's almost also the past. The new paradigm, as Morten pointed very correctly out, is the kind of the smart assistant stuff, right? It's starting to happen. So I mean, right now when you have that smart assistant at home, you can just say, okay, my light's on, or give me this music, or even you can buy shoes if the assistant is the one that is linked with Amazon, for example. And this change is starting to happen slowly and meticulously. So this home that you saw, it's not about that we created more space for the tourism. No, we actually demonstrated that assistant, which by the way is the same assistant that Morten mentioned, not with the ability to make calls, but with the ability to answer the questions. So that you can buy in any Tele2 shop today here. So maybe there's something happening actually. Maybe there's something happening for which we might all think is like, how will we make my wife happy when she's talking with that assistant and not so much browsing around anymore?
So you're actually taking away something from your husband, aren't you? From your wife. The pure joy of planning on and the traveling and the preparations. Do you think that will disappear through the AI first and the voice?
Well, first of all, I don't have the powers to take anything from my wife. That's for sure. So I think the kind of people with all that dopamine power in the brains, so they will definitely go on for a long, long time. And this is going to be still the thing that this dopamine will be consumed on those applications. But what is interesting is that right now there are also a lot of startups who are thinking that, you know, during that process of engaging digitally with the destination to be, so to say, during that process, there are not only the happy hours, there are also the hours during the night when you're frantically trying to book the Ryanair's cheapest option together with EasyJet's cheapest option and so on, right? So some things are still not solved, so to say. So there's a lot of development in that area as well. So I don't think we will all jump on assistance yet, but it's just a food thought.
Around the corner.
Yeah, just a food thought. And of course those assistants, they're not only for the stage before the trip. Of course they are also, of course we go out and then we book AirBnB. So it's nice that instead of finding maybe a key somewhere hidden or so, you could just be unlocked in your Airbnb apartment with a digital key that you just saw, simply host sharing it with you for a couple of nights and so on. So change is quiet, slow, but it's happening.
Thank you. Morten, we have to ask you before we jump in on the Slido questions. How was the mission that you got for changing the experience at the museum in Jelling? What was the main task that they gave you?
You could say Jelling is like some of you come from different sites, but Jelling is like the birthplace of Denmark. This is where the name Denmark is mentioned for the first time 1,000 years ago. So you should imagine this is really something that people owns. And our task was 5 years ago to get more people to come there and make them have a good experience. So there was a lot of people having opinions. For us, it was the most important thing was actually to make people look at museums in a different way. Because normally we think that a lot of people are actually afraid of museums because they maybe had they maybe had some bad experiences as children going to a museum. You can't touch things. You're not allowed to.
Is it too stiff?
Yeah, it's a little too stiff. I know there's a lot of things going on in a lot of museums now, so times are changing. But actually what we achieved the best is that when children come with their parents to our door now, and we welcome them like this, and welcome to our exhibition, and then I stand like this to the children and ask them, so now you are in a museum, what are you going to do? And then they look at their parents, because the parents had told them in the car, please don't touch anything when we come there. And the most happy thing for us is to then tell them, no, you have to touch things here. Because we made that all things that are colored orange through the museum is somewhere you can touch things and something will happen. So to see the children, and especially their parents, relief when they know, we can touch things here, we can do something.
Exactly.
This is not going to be a failure. So that's actually the most important thing, that we make the museum in a level that normal people can cope with.
So everyone can understand the technique, or can everyone use the digital stuff in the museum?
Yeah.
Or
Actually,
is it? Can you see differences in the people?
Of course, there are some that are a little afraid of new technology, but what was important was that people shouldn't come out from the museum afterwards saying, wow, that was a digital fantastic museum. They should come out and say that was a fantastic story. That's the important thing. Actually, they shouldn't really notice the technology, hopefully. That's our aim. So what we see is that some of the elder people, of course, and some of the younger people too, sometimes have difficulties in knowing what to do with this. But then it's a visit for the whole family. So there's always one little brother or one father who knows what to do. And then they get an experience together.
A little comment, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I think that is some great experiences that you made, because I think we usually talk about the digital and physical world like two different entities, right? And one of our experiences with the app, for instance, is that you couldn't just expect people to find it on the app store, but we would actually have to collaborate with all the personnel in the different museums and different exhibitions, so they would feel comfortable about talking about the app for the visitors, so you have somebody to talk to. Because in the beginning, they felt really awkward about it. So, it's some app thing, so it's something else, it's not the museum. And that's a really important signal or message, that even the personnel also can talk about it and have it as a natural way of interacting. And like you mentioned, these orange stripes or something. We also, like in Helsingborg, have these street signs where it says free Wi-Fi, and there's the app information. So it needs to be entangled somehow, I think, the digital and physical. It's not two different things, right?
It's the same, and same world. I'll let some questions in from Slido. I think I'll pass this on to you, Morten. How will a person with a dead phone battery get the experience in Helsingborg?
Well, that depends on what kind of phone you have. No, but of course that will and is a big challenge in general with the phone battery. So there's no general solution for it, but I think we experiment with stuff as well in Helsingborg. Like Emma mentioned, the digital service centers. So there's different information points where you have USB charging stations for people passing by, and we also have tried and experimented a bit with solar-powered park benches across the city. So I don't have a one-stop solution for it, but we'll have to try to make that convenient for people, of course.
So I think I saw a question here before, and it's touching this digital detox holidays, and this every huge trend has an anti-trend. Are you guys afraid of that there's going to be like two separate ways to go? The kids that are born with their smartphones in their hands, are they going to be anti-digital in a few years? Are they going to shut everything off when they go on holiday? Are they tired of having this digital concierge with them the whole time? What do you think? Can you see anything of that in the horizon at Tele 2, or is it just going to increase the whole time? All the digital services and everything you can do with your smartphone, for example?
Well, of course, we're not worried. We didn't ask anyone to start this. You guys did it yourself. So we're absolutely not afraid that this will somehow end. But I think there needs to be a note of kind of responsibility, because, okay, I'm going to make an announcement. I'm not using Facebook, for example. Why I'm not using it? It's because I think that the kind of dopamine game that I would be engaging myself in there is not worth it. So the question of how many kids will make the kind of choices like what do I do with my life in terms of digital, and where do I engage and where I kind of switch off. I would actually recommend kind of personally to be thinking about those topics. Where is your time going into? So are you not lost in some kind of loop? When I look at my daughter, I think she's trying to start to get that idea that you don't do those things. Sooner or later, maybe we'll historically go through some kind of jump, and then we'll see that the kids have done it too much and we have done it too much, and then we will, as correctly pointed out, want to detox as a society. Perhaps, but I do believe that there's a healthy balance. So maybe you get a lot of happiness planning that trip, but then you go off digital a little bit during the trip. So might be as well that.
What about you, Morten? Because I think in Denmark, just as in Sweden, and probably here as well, we have a big discussion about screen time and kids.
Yeah.
How does that interact with your museum?
Actually when I must say 5 years ago we ate the whole elephant at once, because that was the job. We had became quite a lot of money to do this center, so we didn't have the chance to test anything, and luckily it went okay. But actually we decided from the beginning that we didn't want it to have an kind of app or something you did get something in your hand when you came in, and then you had to have earphones on, because then you apart you from the others in the group. For us it was important that you could talk with each other about something you saw in the exhibition and so on. And what we also decided is that it's a journey. When you're going into a museum or an exhibition, you have to sometimes get something digital, because you can tell stories in a playful way sometimes with digital elements. But also it's important to get down here or up here with non-digital things. And actually we see that, and we were surprised, some of the things that we thought in the beginning, oh, is this good enough, is this fun enough, because there's no digital things at all. And we became a little nervous about that, because everybody shouted to us, it must be digital to be good 5 years ago. But what we see is that actually some of the places that are working the best is actually where they can sit down, talk to each other, see something very simple, but to get the chance to talk together. And that's really something that I have 4 children, and I'm really happy to know that it's not all about walking like this, but it's also to talk with each other. And that's something that most of the time went well in Jelling.
I think I saw a question here before, Martin, about putting through these big digital changes in a municipality or in a publicly financed organization. I mean, you come from the private sector as well, and you're in the public sector now, trying to digitalize almost everything in the public sector that we have in Helsingborg. Do you find it harder to do it in the public sector than in the private sector? Is there a big something against it, or is it takes a long time to make it happen?
Absolutely. I think there's some differences in that in the private sector, for me, there's also always been a much clearer drive on what's the next level of your experience or your product. So you would have, you know, like iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth, right? But there's no like the school 3.0 or, you know, this kind of clear vision of where are we heading next time when we'll be on stage this spring, what we will tell the parents, how is the school much better or different than it was last year. That kind of drive is not so natural in the public sector, I think. It tends to be a little bit production-oriented, so a lot of the people that have to carry out the development are sitting in the production line organization. They're line managers, they're teachers, they're taking care of elderly and so forth, and they're not used to, of course, this sort of digital and development-oriented world that has to change all the time. And in the private sector, you would usually have a big development department that sort of pumps out new features and new things that you would sell to the customer, and then you would produce that. But I think the challenge for me in the public sector is that we need to get the people on board. You can't put it in a lab, in a central department. You actually need to get the people working in the core business to get interested and get curious and start exploring these new possibilities. And I think that's the reason why the top management and leadership in our organization are really pushing for this. Guys, just get started, do things. Don't be afraid to fail and test and do stuff. We encourage you to do that. You can earn money if you do that and so forth. We need everybody of these basically 10,000 people to start in the small, to explore, can I do it this way instead of that way? So it's not somebody else's job. I think that's the biggest challenge and difference from my point of view.
And that leads us into the next question. What happened to those 10 professionals in my tourist information center that lost their jobs? I mean, this is a question that we have the whole time with digitalization, and there's going to be new services and we don't need the people, and someone is talking about the people. It's a people's business, the tourism industry. In the case of Helsingborg and the Tourist Information Center, we actually managed to create new jobs because we didn't put less money into taking care of the visitors. We just did it in a different way. Some of them we educated into new departments. I mean, they had to work with social media instead, or they have to work with Google or TripAdvisor or different channels. But some of them went on because they didn't believe in the philosophy. They wanted to work with people, and they went on to other services within the municipality, most of them. But I mean, this is a big fear, I think, when digitalization comes in and people are going to lose their jobs. I mean, how do you work with this in your everyday life? How do you meet those fears?
Well, I think there's not much fears in telecom industry, but look, 100 years ago or so, we were all, not all, but a huge amount of people were working for agriculture, and now it's like 2-3% are being able to feed us all. So so what did that mean? Did the rest lose their jobs? No, we have better jobs. We have more interesting jobs, and this is happening again and again, and we're just going into this cycle again and again. It's not just about digitization. These kind of things that you know the artificial intelligence is going to get all of our jobs, and then we will pointlessly walk in the streets. I think we might come to that at some point, that there will be a universal salary. I would actually be kind of for it, because I think that would release a huge amount of creativity in society from the people who are today kind of doing their job, but they know that I could do so much more by being this or that. So I'm actually kind of waiting for this to happen. I'm afraid that this might not happen in my lifetime, so please, if you could somehow get it faster.
Maybe during your kids' time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you could say that 1,000 years ago all Danes were Vikings,
Yeah.
and now there are none.
There are
So,
no
no,
Vikings.
yeah.
I can assure
But
you that.
actually, this is Jelling is a small town, only 3,000 inhabitants, and actually it's not because of the digital way only, but we made a new museum that made more people come to this town, and more people were hired to do cafes and in the shops, the small shops that are there, and also at the center we made new jobs. So in that way there's of course many new jobs then coming out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Martin?
Yeah, I was just thinking about digitalization in the bigger picture, not just for the tourism sector, but we have these discussions at work, of course, about automation, so administrative automation, that you don't have to be doing a lot of paperwork and punching in numbers in bad user experience systems and so forth. I think it all comes down to your basic view on your identity, who you are, what kind of thing makes out your competence, right? So it's not about, for me, the primary thing is in the public sector, not to cut down on people, but that the people need to do the things that they're good at, that people are good at, and not doing basically stupid administrative things that should just get out of the way, right? So one of those discussions are that we're not trying to introduce this, that we're going to hire digital colleagues, because that scares people in our organization. We talk about automating away the boring things. It's not a competition with something else. And there's some examples in Sweden now where you, for instance, when you apply for money because you need it, I don't know the English term for it, but it went from taking 20 days to get an application approved to 1 day. And of course, the personnel didn't have to do this administrative work of checking up all the numbers and things from different systems, but they could actually spend more time on meeting people face to face. So instead of sitting in front of a computer and doing boring stuff, they could meet the people that they were there for. And I think that's the same thing in the tourism and every other sector. You need to take away that part of your identity is where your value as an employee is that you know how this system works. That is not interesting. Your value as an employee must be in meeting people and knowing how to find new ways to meet your target groups. That's where you should spend your time, not in doing this, stupid stuff.
Morten?
Yeah. We all have seen people employees in museums standing just waiting to tell children not to touch. And I don't know, this job is not the most fantastic, to stand in a room and saying people not to touch. So actually what we did was to move those people from the exhibition, because we made the exhibition possible for people to touch, and to move these people into the welcome. So now we have more people to welcome people, person to person, and that's actually what we get the best reviews from, the personal meeting. There was a salesman coming to us and telling us to have a robot to welcome people, and the idea was funny and so on, but that would be the greatest failure, I think, because that's not what our site is about. It's about the people, maybe 1,000-year-old people, but people. And in the way of the meeting with the guests is the most important meeting. So that's actually also, we get more happy guests and more happy employees actually by that.
There was a question about just about this. Isn't this people's business? I mean, is it a bit premature to close the tourist information center as we did? And I would say it's definitely a people's business. That's why you get so happy to hear that a museum actually works with making sure that you greet the guests and it's definitely a people's business. For us, it was really important to make sure that all the people that already on beforehand always met the tourists, the people that work in the hotels, at the attractions, the taxi drivers, the bus drivers, all the people that already meet the customers, to make sure that they could do the best job they could do. Instead of sending them away and say, okay, look, I can't help you, you have to go to the tourist information center. Oh no, it's 9 o'clock, it's not open, I'm sorry. That's not very good service either. So we made sure that the people that do actually meet the customers get the information and get the inspiration that they need. So we have this inspirational program every year. We take care of them and we take them on study trips. We make sure that they have everything they need from a digital and physical perspective. We still hand out maps and brochures and things like that, because that still comes in hand and people want it. But to making sure that the people that do actually meet the customer can take the best care of the customer. For us, it's still people's business, of course.
But it's also a big difference, even in the digital space, whether you see that there's a review by a reviewer and you see that that reviewer have been, you know, going there, and you kind of start believing that maybe it's an authentic person, you know, as opposed to just information without a face. I think we could transfer that conversation to the digital era and see that the spaces which utilize, I mean, people are so much more successful than the ones that don't.
It's definitely true, and it leads us into one of the questions here, actually. Fake news, fake reviews. Are the days of authentic user-generated content over? What do you think, Morten?
Ooh, that was a hard one, because I think we need to move our perception of where it's necessary to a person to do it and where it's not. So, I mean, a lot of the different news already, like all sports reference and most of the news collections that you see, they're made by machines. It's not people. And I think I heard some number that in southern Sweden, where I live, the number of journalists had halved in the last 5 years. So I don't think it's over, but still not so clear for me where, oh, this only a person can do. That's not so clear for me. What do you guys say?
I don't know if it's an answer to that, but it's what we only have a budget at our place at maybe 7,000 euros a year to marketing. So what is important for us is that our other partners tell a good story about us. Maybe some of you have heard about a little business called Lego, which is situated just 20 kilometers from where we are, Legoland. And do any know that? Yeah, okay. We don't expect people to come to Denmark to come to visit us. We expect them to come to Denmark to visit Legoland. And maybe the second day visit Legoland. And maybe the third day, but on the fourth day, they will come to Jelling, hopefully. And what we achieved is actually that the people at Legoland now tell people about us, because that's the important way of getting people coming there. It's more, people believe, of course, their friends the most. If their friend says, I've been in Jelling, go there. That's good. But if there's another place, amusement park says that, okay, now you've been here 3 days, go to another place. That's a good place. That's really important, and we can feel a lot of those customers coming from Legoland now. So that's great.
Can I add on to that? Is that okay? I was just thinking, because there's a question about how we market the app, and we don't market it basically. We don't buy any newspaper ads or put money on that kind of things, but it's basically just social media viral spread, and then it's of course the personnel at the different museums and exhibitions that help people to get started. And I think the interesting point about that is really, for us, it's not really about the maximum number of downloads. It's actually for people to find more experiences. So we'd rather have people that use the app 2 times than we have a lot of people using it 1 time. I mean, to the point where you're coming from, that we can sort of, you enter one experience like the Dunkers Cultural House and the art exhibitions, but then you discover, hey, there's more here. And you can actually sort of experience part of that because the content is already there. So you can get an understanding of, oh, that park, that sounds wonderful. So you can see this and this and that. So I just think that you need to put your finger on what's your driver behind making this digital experience. And for us with the app, it was really about getting more out of your weekend in Helsingborg, right? Yeah.
We were touching this budget issue a little bit, and hey, you never have enough money, do you? You always have a too small budget, even Tele2 sometimes, I think. Could that be it? That's the thing you always think, at least. But
no, look, you're touching a good question, and you might say, okay, Tele2, we have the money, and well, look, I think this kind of goes also together with the question you asked about the private and public sector. Look, the harsh reality of the private sector is that those good things that you see in form of, for example, AirBnB, I mean, how are they created? Is it like some guy just starts it up and it gets successful? No. They are created by huge venture capital industry where sometimes in those funds they have, like, let's say 100 companies in the fund, and then when the fund is kind of over, then the most valuable company in that fund will be more valuable than the sum of the 99 companies that are in that fund. So what that means? That means there's a lot of experimentation, like failing fast, like you said, happening in the private sector. So even I mean, we'd like to take part in that as a mobile operator, and we're taking, but you have to understand that private industry, it has huge amounts of money working this way, with the failure being expected thing, and success being well, sometimes 10%, sometimes 5% of the outcome. And then the question is, like, I mean, if you have a budget in private sector or in public sector which is limited, how do you play this game then? So I think we have similar problems in terms of that you can't play this game if you only have the budget. You also have to be willing to lose part of it.
And that touches a question to us. If Helsingborg had a huge budget, we're not a big city, a little bit bigger than Jelling. We have almost 150,000 inhabitants. And, well, we used to be 8 people in the Tourist Information Center, and now we're, 10, and now we're 8. And during the transition time, excuse me, during the transition from being a Tourist Information Center to when we closed it, we had to challenge ourselves. We had to try different new things. And of course, that did cost more money than just running a tourist information center the way we always done it. And we failed in some parts, and that was money into the sea and taxpayers' money, so you have to be careful. But during a few years it costed me a lot more, but then in the end, when we actually did close the Tourist Information Center, we now are back on the same budget as we had in 2010. So I'm quite proud of that. So it hasn't been a huge increase of the budget. And usually in the public sector, when you stop doing something, you don't get the money either anymore. So that was one of the big questions for us, at least, to make sure that our politicians said, yes, you can keep the money, even if you close the tourist information center. And we sold a lot of souvenirs and stuff as well, so we had a good income on that as well. You can keep the budget for the tourist information center and use it for other things. So, but money is always an issue, isn't it? Even if you have a huge budget or a small budget. I'm going to see if we have more questions here. Does anyone have experience in using the Facebook Messenger bots?
Oh, sorry, I'm out. I don't know.
You don't even have Facebook.
What is that?
What's Facebook?
Exactly.
No, I can start a little bit. From my perspective, it's going to be a huge change in the coming years. In Helsingborg, we're not so far ahead. We just started out to explore chatbots in our customer services center, so they can sort of automate some of the basic stuff, so we don't have to answer all the questions with people. So we're just starting to experience. But as a general direction of movement of the digitalization in the society, I'd like to point to China, which is a really interesting example. The biggest social network and platform in China is WeChat, and not so many people know about it, but it's basically like Facebook Messenger, but they have also all the services in the society. You book the doctor's appointment, you rent an apartment, you rent a bike, you get a job, you do everything through WeChat, which is a conversational based format like Facebook Messenger, that you don't use an app and then you click and you swipe and you do that kind of things, but you actually just conversate. Please book a doctor's appointment with me. Yes, that will be $50. Okay, I'll pay that. So it's going to change, I think, the whole way we're digitally interacting with our users. So no, we haven't done so much in Helsingborg. We should definitely try to explore and try to figure out what it means.
You have trained a bot, though, I've heard.
Yeah. So we started with this little bot, and talking about failures, we started out and thinking that it was a technical project, so we staffed up with people, and then we thought we were going to buy the copy and the communication part of it from a bureau, and then we found out after a little while that was totally wrong. That was a communication project. So basically understanding the communication patterns of a person needing help, what kind of intent that person had, how do you connect that to different answers and dialogue patterns. So yes, we have a little experiences, and for me it really ended up being about communications and not about technology.
Tourism moving technologies, great. When will technologies start to pay commissions to tourism?
Wow. That's look, I think one of the commissions that is already being paid is that the tourism is growing. In a way, if you wouldn't have information about where to go, or your only choice or option would be to go to some place and ask a person, where can I go? I think that is the way that it's paid today indirectly. It's paid today indirectly, and actually I would actually rephrase it even otherwise. It's like that we are the modest telcos just giving the background for this to happen, but the real stakes, the real apps, the things happening, these are outside of realm of telcos. Like for example, like AirBnB, it's 4 times bigger than the whole yearly budget of Latvia in terms of like capitalization, like how valuable is Airbnb. So it's huge business which has sprung out of just that the premises that everyone has the app, everyone has the connection. We are as telco gaining almost nothing of that particular use of Airbnb. I mean, at the end the data collects up, but you know that as we can see also in Finland, world is slowly moving towards the kind of the unlimited connection. So at some point telcos won't even care how much you do that. It will be more your kind of on your own conscience. How much do you want to spend your time looking into some kind of screen?
But it leads on to an interesting question as well that we have touched a lot in my profession, is that how can we use the telecom companies to actually get data from you? Because you have a lot of data on tourism and tourists and how they move, especially international tourists. Is that something Tele2 has looked into, how to work with national tourism organizations or handing out data? Instead of paying commission, data can be just as interesting.
Well, there's a lot of data, but there's also something called GDPR, if you have heard, right? So it's like, and we have to respect those norms. They're actually quite good ones. I mean, it's nice to buy the data, but it's not nice if your data is sold, right? So we have to keep the balance. But I think in terms of like what telcos are kind of giving back, and not just the telcos, but also the regulation from the public sector. If you look, for example, that next year in the May, also the international calls are going to be kind of regulated and will not be possible that you pay too much for them. And last year in the spring, basically European Union just ensured that when you travel in Europe, then your data is included, which is huge. Before then, you remember those times, and now it's huge difference. And I think that's the kind of the dividend that we are paying, not so much maybe through the data, but through those investments in the infrastructure, which now are shared. And we have all built a huge infrastructure in Europe, for example, and I know it's kind of shared, because telcos they don't get actually kind of the fair share maybe even for it.
So what about authenticity in digital advertising? Is your service shaped to the app, or is the app shaped for the service provided? What would you say, Morten?
Well, definitely, always you need to start with your core business and the user experience, and never on the technology. That's pretty obvious for me, and I'm not sure that we have succeeded the whole way with, for instance, the app and so forth, because they are experimental, just to be honest and open and fair. We don't have all the right answers for that, but for me it's always experience, and the best digital solution you don't even think about as digital, just like you said, Morten. It's like you were thinking, oh, I use technology to do this. It just happened, right? So definitely start with how do you create that.
What about you, Morten? What do you think?
Yeah, as I said, maybe I wouldn't be surprised if we in 1 month or can I have a free phone? What's that? Yeah.
It's a question for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we in next year or in 5 years we will see people coming and not wanted to use anything digital actually, and we will see a wave coming there. But because it would be more intelligent ways of doing things than having your own phone with you. So in that way, we see a lot of new things coming, I think. Yeah.
And still you would have to keep the storytelling, because that's what the people talk about when they come out of your museum. So
yes, that's always what we really want them to do, is that not coming out and saying this was fantastic digital, but this was fantastic story. And actually, I think we get visitors from other museums sometimes coming and telling, we want a table like this where you can do that digital thing. And then we always ask them, what before you have your story, why do you want this thing? First, get your story straight, and then we'll see what kind of technology could we use if we should use any technology. So that's always important. But we get a lot of people coming and from museums saying, oh, this is a great technology. Let's go for that before the story. So,
and just a quick response on that as well, it was so much about the content creation as well. If you think about the app again, I mean, the app was never an issue. That wasn't new, it wasn't something special, but the interesting journey was how we could make the different departments and museums start exploring the different media types. So if you have audio, for instance, well, maybe you shouldn't just read the text that's there anyway, but how can you play with it to create a mood or do something different? So I think there's a big journey not related to the technology per se, but actually how can you create stories and content that utilizes new possibilities. Yeah.
I think we're going to sum this up a little bit, but there is a question about the health issue of all these digital instruments and things that are around us, especially the smartphones. But I think that comes to everything, like we were talking about screen time before as well. Are there any particular health issues that you think that we have to start looking at or start working with more in the future than we do today? What do you say?
Yeah, I do agree. Psychological health, number one thing, I think. Because all this discussion about the waves impacting you, and so when the electricity came in and we had all those wires inbuilt in the rooms and buildings, I mean, we didn't die from that, right? So there is no research right now that proves that for example, the phones are damaging your health, but there is research that proves that if you are, if your kids are over digitizing, then their psychological health is definitely affected. So I would definitely invite you to think about these kind of things, like how much you and your kids and how much all of us, what are we spending our time on and whatnot. So definitely still advocating I mean off-screen activities as much as the screen.
So I'm going to sum this up a little bit, and I'm going to ask each one of you for your last tips or words along the way to sum up this discussion today. What shall the audience take with them home from the age of smart tourism and digitalization versus preservation? Martin, would you like to start?
Oh, should I start? Okay. I think, like I mentioned before, comparing the private sector and the public sector, that it's going to be up to all of you guys in this room, working with your stories, working with your experiences, to take that responsibility and not think that some other department, the guy will fix it for you. You need to train your basic curiosity in what is my story, what is my target group, where can I find them, what kind of things, channels, what do they live, do they use in their everyday lives. And if you're not familiar with them, you need to start trying them. If it's Snapchat or Booking or whatever, you need to use them yourself. And then, of course, just try in small steps to experiment. Okay, let's try this little thing. We can book a little thing. We don't need to book everything and so forth in that. So I think that's the best way to start. Be curious and really do something every day that you didn't do before.
Thank you. Morten?
Yeah, and be curious, but also be, brave. Because sometimes the example of Jelling, where we have this 1,000-year-old story, it sometimes can be hard to, can we do something else? Because this is how they did it 1,000 years, and now we're going to change it in 1 year. But actually, it's sometimes just, you would be surprised how, to use humor sometimes. This is where the first kings of Denmark lived, but sometimes you just have to make it fun, because they were also making some weird things. And actually, that's the way sometimes, just to do it with a smile, to do it. And the combination of humor and digital ways of telling the story actually is very good.
Yeah, from my side, I would come back to what I started. I think it's incredibly important that time before you actually go on that tour. That time is the maybe even more important than the actual tour, because in terms of the tour, things have been pretty much solved. You can get from point A, B, C. That there's enough technology to guide you. You're safe. But I think we should focus to what happens at that time before, because we all have vacation time in the amount that we have it. It's not whole year round, right? It's just those few weeks. But the rest of the time is planning and engaging in it and be happy about what you will do. So I think we should really make sure that the people on those activities before are really happy.
So happy people start testing a little bit every day and making sure that it's authentic and mixing the digital and the real world, I think sums this panel up really well. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
Ooh. Psychological health. I was so glad Didzis brought that up. I don't know about you, but my emotions are all over the place. When the presentation started and we had that Google booking at the restaurant, I was thinking, this is absolutely terrifying. And then Martin said, this is great, isn't it? So then I started to think I must be very old-fashioned and one of these sort of Luddites. They tried to give me an iPad instead of one of these boards, and I refused. They tried to give me one of those microphones that comes around the back of your head instead of one of these ones that you hold in your hand, and I refused. So I was starting to feel very, very old. But then redemption came, and I realized I'm actually the first of this new generation of anti-technology kids. So I am the future. Right, we're going to have the coffee break in a minute, but before that, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping to inform you about. First of all, business-to-business meetings for this afternoon. If you haven't booked one, then it would be an excellent opportunity during the coffee break. If you've used the app to make a B2B meeting, it's all been arranged, but maybe you'd like to go down to the B2B point, which is in the B2B cafe, and you can arrange a face-to-face meeting to complement your digital relationships. And also a reminder that we'll now have the half-hour coffee break, but when we come back, you'll have a choice of 2 different sessions to attend. One in here, and then another one down a professional work group, which will be down in the downstairs, not in the small hall, but in the B2B cafe, where the Baltic Sea Tourism Centre will be talking about concepts for permanent cooperation structures in the BSR with Johannes Volkmar. So please go and enjoy some coffee and some pastries, and we'll see you either here or in the other hall in half an hour. Thank you.